We've got a bit of a puncher, slow puncher. Now, I've got a spare tube, so I've taken the wheel out. We're just going to drop the tyre off, put a new tube in, put it back on. When you come to do a tyre, don't take all the air out the tube. Leave some in there, because if you drop all the air out the tube, when you get your levers in the back of the bead of the tyre, you'll catch that tube, you'll pinch it. If you leave air in the tube, it stays at the back of the tyre, and it should push away from the tyre lever. That's always a good one. So these two clamps, we're slacking those off. We're just going to let some of the air out the tyre. We'll leave the valve in. Yeah, once you've dropped enough air out the tyre, we just nip up the valve. Just make sure that it's going to be soft enough to break off the rim. What you could do is you could put your foot pump on there, get your gauge on there, and just see what PSI is in there. But I think I'll let most of it out. You can tell, because there's not very much coming out now. We just press that back in, which is okay. Next thing is just undo the clamps a little bit, because they're expanding out on the bead of the tyre. We'll slacken these right off. They won't push back by hand, so we just give them a tap. We're just a little bit corroded. There's probably a bit of rust build up just the other side of the rim, so just give them a gentle tap. As we're not going to keep this tube, we're going to put a new one in. It's not so important to leave the air in it. I'm just doing that because that's the normal way you do it, really. I've actually taken the valve right out now, because it really doesn't matter, but that's what I normally do, just to leave a bit of air in there. Right, so the first thing we need to do is break the bead on the rim. Now, sometimes you can push them off. Use an old tyre underneath if you're doing it on the floor. If you can't push it off, go around with a hammer, plastic hammer or rubber hammer, then just push it off. Now it's pushed it off. Just make sure they're backed off those clamps completely. You don't need to take the nut off at the moment. Then we turn the wheel over. We do the same on the other side. Push it right in. Now the secret is to get it in as far as you can. Now we've got rim protectors. I'm going to grab those in a minute, but we should be all right, because alley rims, you're more worried about alley rims marking with the levers. When you're using these rim protectors, you just put them in there like that. Keep away from your clamp. Keep away from your valve to start with. A pair of good levers. I tend to get my knees up on the tyre and give it a good push in first. Then come underneath your rim protector and just see how that tyre feels. You're trying to get as much slack off the rim as possible. Once you've got the initial movement, it'll be away. Keep pushing down. Try and keep that one down, that lever, get that one out, move along. Actually, it's better to go away from the valve. We've got the valve there, so we're going to go this way. You need to back underneath, bring that one up, then break the next one. When you've got a rim protector on, it's a bit harder to get it to roll off because it comes up on the plastic of the rim protector. because we're not working with alley rims, we're going to take this out for the moment, because it is a bit harder with this. Good levers, you shouldn't mark the tyre, the rim. So when you get a bit of bite there, you should start to find it starting to get a little bit easier now. Now we're starting to get round a little bit. Keep your knees pushing down and freeing off this rim with this tyre. It might be easy to come this way now. Just come the other side of that valve. We can take this other one out now as well. It's actually easier said than done. That's better. That just makes it harder because you're rolling over that surface area, and on a steel rim, you know, it's quite hard work. What I haven't done, and you'll probably notice, I haven't slackened off my valve yet, so I need to do that. It doesn't matter because we haven't been pulling on the tyre on this side yet, so we are replacing this tube anyway. Take that fitting right off, then we can push that back up inside. We try and get a bite now. Hopefully it won't come off there, and we come to there and give that a go. Having these two clamps doesn't help. Now it should be fairly easy. There's a mark there, but that's okay. Just make sure you get underneath that bead of that tyre when you're lifting up. Just keep going round. See, it's had a bit of water there. It's a bit tight on the rim. Last bit. Right. Okay. That's the hardest bit. The turn on its side. We just need to lift that over now. But because a bit more air's come out the tube, if the tube was inflated still, we have taken the valve out, it would stay in the back of the tyre. When we lift it off, they can pinch it, but we say we are replacing it, so it's not so important. But just try and lift up so you can get over the back. Just make sure that that's right in the middle as much as you can. I'm going to try it from this side first and see where we are with it. It's quite a tight tyre this, it's not as easy as I thought it's going to be. So go right through the other side. You want to get over the rim the other side. No, can't quite get it. We might just try this side first. Again. It never goes quite as well as you want it to when you're being watched. If you weren't going to keep the tyre, I would say to most people, cut it off if the tyre's had it. Once I've got underneath it, I'll be alright. Might find a little lever just to get it up. It's nearly there. This will make people laugh, I know. We've broken the bead on both sides of the rim and the tire's off of one side, and we're now trying to get it off the other side. But there's hardly any gap. Normally you get a bit of a gap. You can get your lever in, you can get to the other side of the rim, and you can lever it away. But at the moment I'm struggling to get any air. I can't lift it off the other side. It's just nearly there. Okay, I've got through now. Once we've got a bit of a move on this, we'll be all right. It's just the first bit, really. Because the tube's got no air in it, it will probably get pinched on the way off, but we're not too worried about that. Try and keep it up inside, but so when the air's already still in there, it will be out the way enough. Now I've got a second bite. It's not quite so bad. We'll try and keep that lever there. Bring that one out. You can see the tube there, but I say a new one's going in. When you pull your levers out, don't smack yourself in the face. And just go over the back. And then push. Probably stand it up now, like this. And you might be easier now with it. Keep that right back. Then work to yourself with it. Try and poke that tube back inside, because it will hinder you getting that tyre off. I know people are going to say you're pinching that tube, but I say it isn't any good. And we did drop all the air out in the end. Just keep bringing that lever around to you. You've got something to lever back on then. Sometimes you can give that a tap, because the tube is getting underneath the tyre. It just hangs on a bit more. It should go fairly easy now. What we do is just drop those clamps right away, because it's not going to go over the top of the clamp as they usually do. It should be to get the tyre up over the top. If it all comes out together, it doesn't matter. Almost the stage where I can almost push it off, really. See the rim tape, it's quite damaged. There's a bit of surface rust, but what we're going to do, because these are buckled, and I think probably got buckled on a tyre change in the past, we'll put new rims on here sometime, and we'll put decent tyres on here. And the stainless steel spokes at a later date. Just get that bit of tube over the top. Just give that another tap this side. Your water's got underneath there, it's probably got through the spoke holes. undo this one as well. So usually you can go over the top, they usually come away, but usually they stay right in the way. That's it. Okay, we'll pull the tube out. It's probably got pinched in the process of taking that off anyway. And show you on the rim, because the tape needs replacing. Always replace the tape. Underneath here, you can see there's a bit of rust. It's probably run through the spoke holes. And where the bike was sitting for some time, you can see the water's run to the bottom of it probably. And lay there, but it's not too bad. But yeah, it's not a brilliant rim. Okay, because the threads are a little bit damaged on the rim protector. They probably have been a little bit like that for a while, but we're just going to run a tap down here, well, a dye really, and just clean these up. So yeah, it's 5/16 Whitworth. So we just chase up the thread really, like we have done before when we're doing things. So it just takes the flat spots out the thread. If you've got damage on this thread, you'll probably end up winding the nut down and buggering the thread up on the nut as well as on the actual fitting itself on here, on the threaded rod. Just going to buff these up a little bit on the wire brush. Just getting any loose bits of metal out that might be in the thread itself. We're just going to clean the rim up because I'm not going to change this just for a while, so just get rid of the surface rust. What you're checking for now is we're going to check for loose spokes. We're just going to make sure there isn't anything here that is dodgy before we put tape back on. We'll just give it a quick blow with an airline, then we'll put a new tape on. We just put a little bit of lube underneath here, not a lot. I'm really trying to just do the centre. We really just want to leave a little bit of the spray in the well of the nipple hole. So we've got 3 holes in the rim, 1 for the valve and 2 for the rim clamps. So we're going to have to just make a hole in this tape once it's on. Just push that in first, so it gets an impression of the centre. Probably isn't quite the right way, but it'll be fine. Make it a bit bigger. And what we do is just push these in now. Then we make a hole with this one. Make it slightly bigger. It'll push it through when it goes through anyway. We'll just make sure we've got some nice rubber washers. I thought they were aluminium saddles, but they're not, they're just rubber washers. I'll find some and we'll put those on the 2 clamps before we go any further. Well, if you're like me, you don't throw anything away because there's always something you need. And it's like now, we need 2 nice rubber packers really, basically. So you have a rummage through all your rubber bits and pieces. We're never taking them apart like, you know, like grommets and rubber spacers. Keep them somewhere, always come in handy. So we're just finding 2 nice ones to use so it looks okay. Like I say, we are going to change those rims later on, but for now, so it looks right. So I think we found the best ones and that'll look a lot better, and it was. So we're done there. Right, this is your valve tool. We all know what the slotted bit is for. That's for installing your valve into your tube. You get these in caps sometimes, the same shape, and the idea is just to wind that back in and seat the actual valve back into the tube. This one here is a thread chaser. So the idea would be if the thread's damaged inside, because it's only on the 2 sides and it's fluted, you just tap that thread out, just wind it down, just cleans up the thread. This one here, and this one here, will also, it will clean up any damage on the outside. But also if you've put the tube through the rim, you can put this on the other side to pull the valve out, to put it through the actual rim itself. And this one, I really don't know. Tiny little bit of copper slip, always put a little bit on. We're just going to put the steel washers on the top. Now we've got to leave those loose because when the tyre goes on, it's got to get the other side before we pull the clamp down. So we leave those loose, but in far enough. what we need to do now is just clean up this bead of the tyre, because the rim's going to sit on here. And what we do, we put some soap, tyre soap around here. Fairy liquid's okay, but people do say it can rot the tyre. I do use it sometimes, but this is quite good. This is proper tyre soap. It's not quite so messy. And you should start squirting fairy liquid, it runs everywhere. But I tend to try and get on a little bit of this tyre soap on both sides to start with. If you find when you blow your tyre out, and it's one place where it won't blow out properly, you let the air back out, you push it back off the rim, and then you put some soap round. I've got some here, and it's a lot easier to use lots of liquid to try and get that last little bit out. You want quite a bit on the inside because you want this to push out. That is always the thing when the tube is trying to push the tyre out onto the rim. You get that point where it's a bit dry and it doesn't want to push out the last bit. So try and lube it up well. Obviously both sides. So we've got a new tube. What we do, take the first nut off. You always leave the second one on. That goes up inside the rim. See, when that's in, it sits in the back of the tyre out the way. You're not going to pinch that, and it's still nice and soft. It won't stop us getting that tyre on. Now, the next thing is, make sure it hasn't got direction. A lot of tyres have a rear wheel direction, a front wheel direction. This one hasn't got anything on here because the tread pattern's the same. But when you have a certain tread pattern, you have the driven wheel, and the front wheel is different from the driven wheel. Always check on that. And it's a good idea sometimes, if that is the case, to get a felt pen and mark on your rim directional rotation, because it's quite easy to, what we've done here, you use your soap on your tyre, the way you're going to go on, you flip it over, you do the other side and you go and put it on. And you've ended up putting your tyre the wrong way around. Okay, just putting a bit of extra soap on here. I might just put a little bit on the rim because this one is a bit of a tight one. Right, we've got our valve here lined up and our dot on here. First thing you need to do is bring your valve into your rim. Because we got it slightly semi-inflated, we just had to pull it out, hold it out, get as close as you can, then get your nut on. Don't have to go on very far. Right, that's now in place. Right, what's nice is because you've got the tube inflated, it's in the back of the tyre, so you're not worrying about stuffing it all in. And we just have to make sure these clamps are on and not tight. And explain why in a moment, because they need to literally get the tyre over the top and then be pushed up inside, so that the lip of the tyre is on the inside of this clamp. So what we can do now, we can start now pushing this on. First, do by hand. Try and not turn it so the valve is getting pushed round, but it should be okay. Right, we've got to there now, so we're going to just pick it up. Now you might want to do it down here or lift it up. I think we lift it up for a moment. Just keep it there. Just let it go around. You might have to keep your lever on your rim and just keep moving it round. Because you soaked it up, everything's quite easy now to move. That should follow round. You can see how it's come up here. Keep going round. Right, that's one side on. Now this is where you need to check. Your rim clamp here is folded over. So lift it up and make sure it's going on the other side of that part of the tyre, the bead of the tyre. Check this one round here, So we've got 2 clamps on this one. Yep, that's okay. Now we need to come up on this side. And because we've got 2 on here, it's a bit of a pain. We're going to start and go round that way, I think. So again, we lift it. You're not going to touch your tube because it's right in the back, but don't put your lever through too far. Bring that up over there. We're not using rim protectors because it's an old rim. I mean, you know, these are good levers anyway, and we're not going to do any damage. If they were Baroni rims or, you know, decent quality aluminium rims, it'd be different. Hold that there, then get your next bite not too far away. I'm trying to get the other side of this rim clamp, if I can, to get it in one go. So I'm going to come a little bit closer there, about there, and get that to carry on there. Now, that's now free. Make sure that is right out the back, out the way. That's it. That shouldn't be a problem anymore now. Leave that lever there, take this one out. Right, that's okay. Same here. Let's get that the other side of that one. Push that. Push that back. Right, now we've got to get this side on. Let's start by a clamp again. This is where your knees come in. If you lose it, just put another lever back in there. Just make sure that's right back out the way. When you remove the lever, try and use your knee to take the place of the lever. First bit should be quite easy. But you're trying to take that one out, get your knee there, keep it, a little bit of pressure there. Now we're up on this second clamp. We need to get past this clamp, then we're laughing. Then same again here, just make sure before you push it in, you can actually get that right up to the back. Because you want this tyre, the bead, to drop down on the inside of that clamp, which it has now. We're okay. We're going to leave that lever there for the moment. Just get another bite the other side. Now these are both. We just check this one again in a minute. Before we go any further, before anything gets tight, we just make sure that clamp. I think once we got this tyre back down, I think we'll come back to this one now. Because like I say, we want to make sure that clamp is okay. Yeah, it's there, it's alright. Just making sure again. That's it, it's moving. All the time that's moving freely, that's it. It's okay. So important to make sure that's not got the wrong side. Nobody likes doing tyres particularly, and it's not one of my favourite jobs, as you probably can see, but give yourself time. Put your knee back on here again. Now we're up to where the valve is, and we'll be a little bit careful here because that's where the tube is going to be in more contact with you. Now that's jumped out a little bit up here, so come back here. Now this is an important bit, just to get past this clamp again on here. So it's a fiddle because we've got 2 clamps on this tyre. Now be a little bit careful now on your last bit now. Now the next two bites where you leave are going to be most important really. We just have to make sure that the bead of the tyre is in the bottom part of the rim, not sitting on the lip of the rim. It's got to be right in the bottom, so the tyre is quite slack. Take small bites now because you're right at the end. You won't get a lot. This is where you've really got to be a little bit careful. Now we've ended up a little bit close to the tyre valve here, but that'll be all right. It's a little bit hard getting underneath the tyre here because this is the last push really. We might be able to do it on one lever if we're lucky. There we go. Push it in. Now the clamps should be okay. What I tend to do is just give it a bang all round. The tyre valve, just do your nut up a little bit, just enough so you can get your inflator on. These clamps now, we know that they're okay because they're nice and loose. There's not an issue with those. We can just take the slack up now. We try and make sure that the tyre hasn't caught the tube, is exposed, and it's sitting as much as possible with this line here sitting on the outside of the rim. What we're going to do in a moment is we're going to take the valve out and we'll inflate it without a valve. You have to exceed the working pressure to inflate this. Now what we try and do is blow it right out, get the valve back in quickly and make sure that we have this sitting properly on the rim. Just spend a bit of time just making sure it's sitting right. Now I think we're okay on this. We've just taken the valve out to inflate the tyre, but just showing you, when you've got this service tool, trying to work between the two spokes is near impossible. As you can see, I was fiddling around a little bit. You're better off finding an old valve cap. They're usually like this, and if you take it off, you'll find it's got the same fitting as you've got here. Let's get the two together. Okay, that is much easier because we can push this in here and we can spin that around with our thumb and finger. It's a lot easier. Now what we're looking for now on this inflation is this line of this tyre running parallel with the rim. And you can see now the security clamps are blown out. We pull those nuts up afterwards, but that line wants to be the same both sides. We haven't got tube leaking, it's just my fitting here. So we've just taken our tyre inflator off, and as the air escapes, we put our valve back in. So never do it if you've got a lot of pressure in a tyre. If you've got a tyre where it's not seated on the rim properly, and you've gone up to, I've done it 70, 80 psi, it is a bit dodgy, so let that air come out, get it right down to where it's almost like, I don't know, 12, 15 psi, well the other side of 20 anyway on this side, then put it back in because compressed air and skin is not a good thing, so I must mention that to health and safety. But don't have to let all the air back out, and you don't want the actual tube to deflate and the tyre to collapse in and pop back off that rim because you've blown it out. You want to keep that air in there. You might have had to use a lot of pressure to get that inflated. So try not to lose all your air, get your valve back in and screw it in, but don't do it over tight. So now we're ready just to check again and blow it up to working pressure. So we now go up, we're going to go up to about 28, 30 now, psi. Well, tyre pressures, as everyone knows, every bike has different pressures, but rule of thumb, they're around about, rear tyre about 28, 30. So we're going to set this at 30. And what we'll do, we'll keep an eye on this for a few minutes to see if that drops off, because we hope we haven't pinched the actual tube, but if we have, we don't want to fit the wheel back into the bike and have to take it back out. So we put 30 in there. Now it's blown the tube out to size. We just do up that nut. Now we just nip that with a spanner. There is a nut on the other side of the rim. We just pull that up, but not over tight. That'll do. Now these ones, the security ones, they now need to be tightened up because they've now got to pull down, and they will stop that tyre from moving on that rim. It's a road bike, it's not quite the same as some knobbly tyres that got lots of traction. It will probably spin away from the rim. Because we cleaned our threads up, they should run down nice and easy now. Because we've got rubber washers now back on replaced ones, you shouldn't get any water getting on the inside of that. Yeah, when you come to tighten these clamps up, the rim clamps, you don't need to over tighten it. I've got there, I'm just pulling that down, but it's not a silly amount. Because it's not going to slip in this. It's a road bike, but we're just pulling those down. We're really more conscious of the rubber being pulled down onto the rim, so we don't get water getting into the rim any more than we have to. You just feel it, but it doesn't need to be any more than that. Now that should be okay. Now that's sitting okay. Another thing you can do, you can just pick your wheel up and you can just spin it, and you can see where your tyre is. It's not bulged out anywhere, and it's sitting on that rim quite nicely. Anyway, that's done. So I can go back in, but we're going to give it a few minutes just to make sure it holds that pressure before we put it back in. We don't like doing tyres particularly, and especially when you've got something like with the two clamps. Now, I would say to anyone, you've got an old tyre and you've got a new tyre and a new tube, don't mess about like I was messing about. You could carefully cut that off. Makes it a lot easier, because I was struggling trying to get this tyre off because I need to reuse this tyre. And because it's been on here a long time, you can see it was dry, it had grown onto the actual rim. You've got a bead of like rust, and water had been in there obviously, and it doesn't want to come away easily because it's all dry. You could probably, another thing I could have done is probably could have soaked it all up and it might have come off a bit easier. But in hindsight, you know, you can look back at that. But when you go to put the tyre and tube back on, if you inflate your tube and put it into your tyre, don't overinflate it so it's still soft. But it's taken that, it's gone from flat to it's got its main form. Stick it in there, and then when you put it onto your rim, like we did just now, you get your valve and you pull the valve, or you push it through from this side and you get your nut on. That's the hardest thing to do. And so a lot of people try to do that with an uninflated tube, and it's a nightmare. You can't get into the back to do it, and the inflated tube works. And I say when you pop the tyre onto the rim, the tyre should be out of the way of getting pinched because it's got its form. It's not flat anywhere. It should not get caught up with your levers because you're levering on, and it should be in the back, and it should just literally come up against that lever and kiss it rather than pinch it. So yeah, I think we're okay. But yeah, tyres can be a bit of a nightmare. You can get one that's a pain, and the others are okay. But it's gone back on okay, and that's how it should be. They shouldn't be, you know, difficult to put on really. If you lubed it up well and your clamps, your threads are okay, and do what I've done, just back them off and make sure that your tyre has come over the lip of the clamp, and then you've been able to pull it back down and tighten it. If you don't make sure that's right, that clamp could have got, I don't know, there's like a lip piece on that clamp, and that could have got caught with the tyre, and it's not pulling down properly. So it's got to be free, and that's fine, that's done. So yeah, we're there now, but we're just going to give that a few minutes. We just check that pressure. I don't think we've trapped it anywhere. It doesn't feel, because usually when you get a hole in a tube, it goes down very quickly, and you usually can hear it somewhere escaping. But yeah, all good. And so we had a mark on here that I tend to, if there's any sort of reference of anything, I tend to line it up. It's not that important really, because these aren't balanced on here. and I'll put it in line with the valve, that dot on the tyre. So that's done. Balancing, and it's something that, because we've got 2 competition clamps on this rim, you have got that weight on that side of the rim. Now, be honest with you, you should have something this side to compensate for the extra weight that side. But this is a road bike, and it isn't in competition use. These clamps normally are used for trials. You know, you don't normally see them on a road bike because, as I said earlier, you haven't got a knobby tyre. The tyre, you're not going to be pushing through a lot of torque through that back wheel and spinning that tyre up excessively. With a knobby tyre, yes, you would do, probably off-road, and that's why you have these clamps, so you don't want the tyre to suddenly turn on the rim. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to now balance this up with great big weights on this side. Like I say, in 6 months' time, we'll have new rims on here, and we'll only have a valve in the rim. We won't have these. But if this was a racing bike, you wouldn't have these, but you would want to spin a wheel and find where it stopped, and you find the heaviest point, and you go opposite, and you put a weight, and you spin it again. But with a back wheel, with chain drive, it isn't that essential. Not as this bike is used on the road, just to, you know, it's just a hack to work. So we've put it back as it was, just literally with a new tube.